Welcome back to the deep dive. Today is Wednesday, February 25, 2026. And I have to say, looking at the stack of papers we have on the desk this morning, it doesn't really feel like a standard news update.
No, it really doesn't.
It feels more like we are holding the script for a summer blockbuster that just happens to be real life.
It absolutely does. We are sitting here the morning after what has to be one of the most consequential nights in modern American political history. We've got the full transcript of President Donald Trump's 2026 State of the Union address, and on the other side, the Democratic response from Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger.
Right. And contrast doesn't even begin to cover what we are actually looking at here. We aren't just looking at two different political parties. It feels like we are looking at two completely different dimensions of reality.
Precisely. On one side, you have this grand vision of a golden age, right? A country that is winning so much it almost doesn't know what to do with itself. And then on the other, you have a very stark warning of tyranny, a warning of a system that is essentially collapsing under the weight of corruption and very specific policy failures.
So our mission today, and we are going to take our time with this because there's just so much to unpack, is to sift through all this rhetoric. We aren't here to take sides at all. We are just here to look at the golden age versus the warning of tyranny and see what is actually inside these speeches. What are the facts, what are the policies, and what are the claims?
And the source material is dense. I mean, really dense. The president's address went over an hour and 45 minutes.
A marathon.
A total marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And Governor Spanberger's response, while obviously shorter, was delivered from a location that carries immense historical weight, which we will get into.
Yeah. For the listener who might have missed the speech last night, maybe you were working, maybe you just couldn't bring yourself to watch the whole thing, buckle up, because we are going to talk about some things today that, if I read them in a political thriller novel, I'd probably say they were too far-fetched.
We're talking about a literal military raid to capture a foreign dictator.
A massive constitutional standoff with the Supreme Court where the president is essentially saying, well, I'm doing it anyway.
And the creation of something called Trump accounts for every single child in America.
It is a lot to get through. And the context for all of this, the shadow hanging over both of these speeches, is that we are just months away from the nation's 250th anniversary. July 4, 2026 is looming over absolutely everything in our politics right now.
That date is the anchor. It's the gravity holding all these completely disparate policy pieces together. Both sides are trying to claim the mantle of that anniversary.
So let's dive right in. I want to start with the tone and the setting, because I think the framing tells us everything about where these two sides are coming from.
Absolutely. Let's look at the president first. He started his speech by declaring that the nation has moved from a state of crisis to a golden age in just 12 months.
Right. He didn't ease into it at all.
No, he called it a turnaround for the ages. And he kept referencing that date, July 4, 2026. He views his presidency and this specific moment in time as the culmination of the last 250 years. He called it a glorious American independence.
So he's framing the upcoming anniversary not just as a birthday for the country, but really as a validation of his return to power.
Exactly. And the overarching theme was undeniably winning.
It really was. And he didn't just use winning as a vague slogan. He brought receipts. And interestingly, he used sports to do it, which is a very effective rhetorical tool.
She spent a surprising amount of time on the 2026 World Cup, which is coming up, and the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. He's deliberately associating his administration with these massive global spectacles of victory.
But the hockey segment, that was a moment where I felt like, okay, this is vintage Trump.
The men's Olympic hockey team.
Yes. He brought the whole team out. They apparently beat Canada in overtime for the gold, which, as a hockey fan, is a genuinely big deal.
Is a huge deal. But look at how he told the story. He focused specifically on the goalie, Connor Hellebuyck.
Right.
He described a save Hellebuyck made, and he got very, very descriptive. He was talking about the stick behind the back, hitting the neck of the stick. He really loves that physical detail of excellence. But then he pivoted to the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
This was the part that made me pause, but also made me think. He said he took a vote, right?
He did. He told the audience, I told them, anybody votes? No, I'm not doing it. He was joking, obviously, but he explicitly said that if one player raised their hand, the goalie wouldn't get the medal.
It's such a fascinating leadership insight. He's joking, but he's also demonstrating that he governs by the consensus of winners. He's telling the room, I'm one of you. We decide this together.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a relaxed, victorious leader just hanging out with champions. There's no crisis in that room. There's just gold medals and accolades. It's a very potent image.
But then you change the channel. You go to the Democratic response. And the visual could not be more different if they tried.
No. Governor Abigail Spanberger wasn't in a shiny TV studio. She wasn't in a loud rally hall. She was at the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Which is a very heavy setting.
It's the birthplace of American democracy, essentially. This is where the Virginia colony gathered way back in 1705. She is explicitly invoking that pre-1776 spirit.
So while Trump is claiming the 250th anniversary as his victory lap, Spanberger is actively trying to reclaim the history.
Precisely. She said, before there was a Declaration of Independence, there were people in this very room. She is framing the anniversary not as a celebration of the president, but as a reminder that ordinary people have the right to, in her words, reject unacceptable excesses of poor leadership.
She didn't pull any punches at all.
Not at all. She said the president lied, scapegoated, and distracted. She framed the entire Golden Age narrative as a complete facade.
She asked those 3 specific questions. I actually wrote them down while I was watching. She looked right at the camera and asked, is the president making life affordable? Is he keeping you safe? Is he working for you?
And her argument is that despite the fireworks and the hockey teams and the gold medals, for the average person sitting at home, the answer to all 3 is a resounding no.
So we have the Golden Age versus the rejection of tyranny. Let's get into the substance of that disagreement. Let's talk about the economy, because this is where the rubber meets the road for most of you listening.
It is. And the president threw out some stats that are, well, they are staggering if they hold up.
He claimed inflation is down to 1.7%.
Which is incredibly low compared to the spikes we saw in recent years.
And gas prices. This was the one that social media was absolutely buzzing about last night. He said they are under $2.30 in most states. And he claimed he saw it for $1.85 in Iowa.
$1.85?
I mean, I haven't seen $1.85 since I was in high school driving my parents' sedan around.
It's a powerful number. It's visceral. Everyone sees gas prices every single day. And he credits his drill policies, obviously.
He mentioned American oil production is up by 600,000 barrels a day. But he also slipped in a detail about where some of that oil is coming from that we really need to flag for later.
Yes. This connects to the massive foreign policy bombshells we'll discuss in a bit. But he mentioned receiving 80 million barrels of oil from our new friend and partner, Venezuela.
Partner Venezuela.
Yeah.
That is a phrase that would have been completely unthinkable just 2 years ago.
It would have been impossible. But in this new reality he's describing, Venezuela is supplying cheap oil to the U.S.
Staying on energy for a second, he brought up AI, and it's felt like a very new, very specific type of policy that we haven't heard much about before.
This is what he called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge.
Break that down for us, because AI energy use is kind of a boring topic right up until you see your electric bill skyrocket.
Exactly. We all know AI data centers use massive, unprecedented amounts of power. There has been a growing fear nationwide that this demand from big tech will drive up utility bills for regular families. The grid just can't handle the strain.
So what is his proposed solution?
He's taking a very populist stance against the tech companies here. He's saying, if you want to build a data center, you have to build your own power plant.
Wait, literally build a power plant?
Yes. You cannot just plug into the local grid and spike the costs for everyone else in the county. He said they have an obligation to provide for their own power needs.
That is a massive infrastructure burden to place on private tech companies, basically saying, go build a nuclear reactor or a gas plant if you want to run your servers.
It is, but think about the brilliant politics of it. He's positioning himself as the ultimate protector of the little guy's utility bill. He even went so far as to suggest that because these tech-built plants will produce surplus energy, they might actually lower costs for the surrounding communities.
It's a have your cake and eat it too solution. We get all the economic benefits of AI, but big tech foots the bill for the electricity infrastructure.
Right. Now, obviously, Governor Spanberger isn't buying this utopia.
No, she is very much not.
She argues that despite these specific examples or these grand promises, the aggregate cost of living is still crushing people. She specifically mentioned housing, healthcare, and insurance. And she points to the president's tariffs as a major driver of that everyday financial pain.
She said reckless trade policies have cost American families $1,700 each.
That's the exact counter statistic to his cheap gas argument. Sure, maybe gas is cheaper, but you're paying $1,700 out of your pocket because of tariffs on everyday goods.
And this brings us to the elephant in the room, the tariffs. This isn't just a standard economic disagreement between two parties. This is a full-blown constitutional crisis that was sort of hidden in plain sight in this speech.
It is arguably the most significant structural moment in the entire address. To truly understand this, you have to look very closely at what Trump actually admitted from the podium.
He acknowledged that the Supreme Court struck down his tariffs just 4 days ago.
4 days. He called it an unfortunate ruling.
Now, usually when the Supreme Court strikes something down, that's the end of it. The president says, we disagree with the court, but we follow the law.
Not this time. This is where we need to parse what he called the workaround.
The workaround. It sounds like something you do with IT when your computer freezes up.
In this case, it's a workaround of the entire judicial branch. He claimed that countries and corporations are voluntarily keeping the tariffs in place.
Stop there. Why would they do that? Why would a multinational company voluntarily pay a massive tax that the Supreme Court of the United States just said they don't have to pay?
Because, according to Trump, they fear that if they don't play along, he will use his executive power to negotiate something far worse for them legally down the line.
So the Supreme Court says you can't force them to pay this. And Trump says, I don't have to force them. They're doing it voluntarily because they're terrified of what I'll do otherwise.
Exactly. He calls it utilizing fully approved and tested alternative legal statutes. That is a very fancy, bureaucratic way of saying coercion.
It's pure leverage.
It's raw executive power. And his vision here is incredibly radical. He suggested that these tariffs, paid by foreign entities in his view, could eventually replace the income tax system entirely.
Replace the income tax. That would be the biggest shift in American economics since the 16th Amendment was ratified.
He framed it as taking a great financial burden off the people that I love. Imagine a world with no IRS, no April 15th filing deadline, a federal government funded entirely by consumption taxes on imported goods.
I mean, it sounds incredibly appealing to a lot of people.
Of course it does. It's an incredibly popular idea on its face. But Spanberger's counter is that in the immediate term, while we are all dreaming of no income tax, American farmers are losing their international markets right now, and small businesses are getting crushed by the immediate cost of imported goods. She's looking at the friction of today. He's looking at a theoretical tomorrow.
Speaking of taxes, let's talk about the Great Big Beautiful Bill.
That's the actual name of the legislation.
He listed off the greatest hits of this bill. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security.
He brought up a woman named Megan Hemhauser from Pennsylvania to illustrate this perfectly. She's a homeschooling mom who waits tables part-time. Her husband works overtime.
A completely perfect demographic target for this message.
Exactly. He claims this specific family is taking home an extra $5,000 this year because of his policies. That's real, tangible money for a family like that.
And there was a specific deduction for auto loans, right? I found this particular provision really interesting.
Yes. Interest on auto loans is now tax deductible. But there is a very big catch.
There's always a catch.
It's only deductible if the car is made in America.
So it's economic protectionism baked right into your personal tax return.
Correct. If you buy a Ford or a Chevy, you get a tax write-off. If you buy a Toyota that was made in Japan, you don't. It uses the tax code to force consumer behavior.
But the thing that really jumped out, the thing that felt like a brand new, massive entitlement program, was the Trump accounts.
Or, as he insists on calling them, the accounts he didn't name.
Right. He blamed the tall man in the third row.
He said, I didn't want to call them that, but this tall man stood up and said, we must call them Trump accounts. It's a great bit of political theater.
But the branding is clearly there, trumpaccounts.gov. Let's look at the policy itself. What exactly are these?
It is essentially a tax-free investment account created for every single American child.
Every child.
Every single child. He says millions of these will be pre-funded by the Treasury, and interestingly, by private donors.
He mentioned Michael Dell specifically during the speech.
Yes. Michael and Susan Dell apparently contributed $6.25 billion to this.
$6.25 billion. That is a staggering amount of private money to just hand over to a government program.
It is. Trump told a little anecdote about asking Michael Dell how he made his money, selling computers from his college dorm room.
But think about the underlying mechanism here. You have massive private philanthropy being funneled directly through a government-branded program to individual citizens.
It's completely blurring the lines between the state, the private sector, and the president's own personal brand.
And the stated goal is for these accounts to grow to $100,000 by the time the child reaches age 18.
That's the promise. A $100,000 nest egg for every 18-year-old in the country.
It's basically a turbocharged baby bond program. But think about the long-term political implication of this. If you are a parent and you log in online and see an account with your child's name on it growing every single year, and it's explicitly called a Trump account, that creates a very durable, multi-generational loyalty. It connects the citizen's financial future directly to the name Trump.
Exactly. It's brilliant marketing and highly consequential policy wrapped into one.
Let's shift gears to the border and immigration. Because if the economic stuff was unorthodox, the border section was just aggressively uncompromising.
Aggressive is putting it mildly. The president's claim on immigration is absolute. He said, and I quote, "The border is closed."
He stated there have been 0 illegal aliens admitted in the last 9 months.
0. That is a statistic that is almost impossible to verify in real time, but that is the firm claim he is standing on. And he contrasted that 0 heavily with what he called the invasion under the previous administration.
He introduced a new piece of legislation here, too, the Delilah Law.
This was a very, very emotional moment in the speech. It's named after Delilah Coleman.
Tell us about her story.
She was 5 years old back in 2024. She was severely injured by a driver who was in the country illegally. But the specific policy point Trump hammered on was that the driver hadn't issued a commercial driver's license.
Granted by the state.
Granted by the state of California. Trump used this specific detail to argue that states are fundamentally complicit in these tragedies.
So this proposed law would ban states from doing that.
It bars any state in the union from granting commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens. He had Delilah and her father Marcus up in the gallery. She's currently learning to walk again.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And he used that heartbreak to justify the next major step of his agenda, which is mass deportations. He also brought up the angel moms.
Specifically Jacqueline, the mother of Lisbeth Medina.
Right. Lisbeth was a young cheerleader who was tragically murdered. Trump used very graphic, visceral language to describe how she was found. He is using these individual horrific tragedies to build the moral case for what he calls getting them the hell out of here fast.
But then he pivoted. He pivoted to something he called the war on fraud. And this felt different to me. This wasn't just about border crossings. This was about people who are already here, living in communities across the country.
This was essentially a declaration of a domestic targeted operation. He announced that Vice President J.D. Vance is leading it. But he specifically singled out one group.
The Somali community in Minnesota.
Yes. He openly accused them of pillaging $19 billion from the taxpayers.
19 billion. That is a massive, massive number.
He literally called them Somali pirates who ransacked Minnesota. He claims that recovering this money, which he classifies as fraudulent payments, will balance the federal budget overnight.
That is a massive accusation to level at an entire community on national television, pirates ransacking the state.
It is, and he lumped in other states too, like California and Maine, saying they are even worse. It suggests a new strategy of targeting specific ethnic or immigrant communities within the U.S. to systematically claw back federal funds. It's not just about deportation anymore. It's about deep financial investigation and asset seizure.
Now, Spanberger, as a former federal agent and CIA officer, had a very specific reaction to this exact type of rhetoric.
She did. She tried to completely flip his law and order narrative. She accused the president of using federal agents to terrorize local communities rather than solve actual crimes.
She mentioned a specific image that really stuck with me, the little boy in a blue bunny hat.
That was a striking visual choice. She described federal agents forcibly detaining children. Her argument is this: every single minute, a highly trained federal agent spends detaining a nursing mother or a little child in a bunny hat is a minute they aren't investigating a real murder or a complex scam against a senior citizen.
She's arguing that this war on fraud and these massive deportation raids are actually a dangerous distraction from real public safety.
Exactly. She claims it sows fear and chaos rather than creating the order he's promising.
Let's move to healthcare. This is another area where Trump claims he has essentially solved the underlying problem.
He's focusing very heavily on drug prices. He calls his solution the Most Favored Nation program.
Basically, the idea is that the U.S. pays what other countries pay.
That's the concept. If France negotiates to pay $10 for a pill, we pay $10, not 500. And of course, there's a new website for this.
Drug.gov.
Yes. Another one he playfully claims he didn't name.
He really sticks to the personal branding across every agency.
He really does. But he highlighted a woman named Catherine Rayner. She's an IVF patient.
IVF treatments are incredibly, sometimes ruinously expensive.
They are. And she apparently dropped her necessary drug costs from $4,000 down to under $500 using this specific website.
That's a tangible, immediate benefit. If that's working as described, that changes lives.
It does. But Spanberger says we need to look at the broader systemic picture. She argues that while your specific drug prices might be lower on the president's website, the actual physical infrastructure of healthcare is collapsing under his watch.
She focused heavily on rural America.
She blames Trump's legislative package, the One Big Beautiful Bill, for systematically closing rural health clinics. Her argument is simple. Sure, you might be able to order cheap drugs on the website, but if your local clinic closes and you have absolutely no doctor within 50 miles to prescribe them or monitor you, what good is it?
That makes sense. There was also a very intense segment on gender and education, the story of Sage Blair.
This was a major, major culture war moment in the address. Sage Blair was sitting right there in the gallery. According to Trump, she was a girl who was transitioned by her school to a boy, completely without her parents' knowledge or consent.
She was 14 years old.
14. He said she ran away, ended up placed in a boys' state home by the courts, and has since detransitioned. She's now a student at Liberty University.
And he used this harrowing story to propose a federal ban.
A total federal ban on schools or states transitioning children without explicit parental consent. He was very blunt about the people involved. He said nobody stands up to them. These people are crazy.
It's a huge rallying cry for the parental rights movement.
It is. And he seamlessly tied this idea of what he calls common sense into voting rights too. The Save America Act.
This is the incredibly strict voter ID law.
Proof of citizenship required, no mail-in ballots allowed whatsoever, with very narrow exceptions for active military or severe illness. And he made that very folksy comparison to New York City shoveling snow.
Right, I totally forgot about that part. He said even the communist mayor of New York requires ID to shovel snow.
He called the mayor a nice guy, but communist. But the underlying point was simple and easily digestible. If you need a government ID to get a Temp City job shoveling snow, why shouldn't you need an ID to vote for the president? It's a highly simplified argument, but it resonates incredibly effectively with his base.
Okay. We have covered the economy, the border, the culture war, but we have to get to foreign policy. Because if the domestic stuff was intense, the foreign policy section was literally like reading an action movie script.
It really was. This is where the Golden Age narrative took a sharp turn into pure, unadulterated military spectacle.
Trump claims to have ended 8 wars in 10 months.
He just rattled them off. Cambodia, Thailand, Pakistan, and India. He's presenting himself to the world as the great historic peacemaker.
He also mentioned Gaza. He said it's low level now.
And he credited Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for returning the hostages.
Including the deceased ones.
Yes. That was a very somber moment in the chamber. He specifically mentioned recovering 28 bodies and described how deep into the earth they had to dig to find them. He really wanted to emphasize that he brought absolutely everyone home, regardless of whether they were alive or dead.
But then he dropped the massive bombshells. First, Iran, Operation Midnight Hammer.
This is a casual reveal of a massive covert military action that apparently happened last June. We were all just hearing about it for the very first time.
What exactly happened?
He said the U.S. military completely obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program.
On Iranian soil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deep inside Iran. He framed it entirely as preemption. He said they were actively building missiles capable of reaching the U.S. He basically told the country, I stopped them before they could even start.
He also casually mentioned the regime had killed 32,000 of their own protesters recently.
Right. He's framing the U.S. strike as a dual moral victory, stopping an existential nuclear threat to America and punishing a brutal, murderous regime.
But the biggest story of the night, the one that literally had the chamber chanting USA, was Venezuela.
This was the absolute climax of the speech's entire narrative arc.
We mentioned the cheap Venezuelan oil earlier. Now we know exactly how we got it.
Exactly. Trump described what he called a spectacular feat. He said U.S. Special Forces completely defeated Maduro's defenses. And he made a very specific point to say those defenses were heavily guarded by advanced Russian and Chinese technology.
So it wasn't just about beating Venezuela's army, it was about beating Russian and Chinese tech on the battlefield.
Correct. And they captured Nicolas Maduro,
Captured him alive.
captured him alive to face U.S. justice, and they immediately installed Delcy Rodriguez as the new president. This is regime change, plain and simple, executed by the U.S. military. And that's exactly why we suddenly have these new, highly favorable oil deals.
But the story the pilot he told, Chief Warrant Officer Eric Slover, that was incredibly graphic.
It was visceral. Trump didn't sanitize the violence of it at all. He described Slover piloting a massive Chinook helicopter into a hot zone.
He said he was hit in the leg?
He said his leg was absolutely shredded by enemy fire.
Blood flowing down the aisle.
Yes. Trump described the pilot's blood flowing back down the aisle of the helicopter. Can you imagine the chaotic scene? A massive military helicopter taking heavy fire, the pilot critically wounded, blood pooling on the floor.
And despite all of this, Slover turned the bird around.
To let his gunners clear the landing zone, he didn't retreat to safety. He turned directly into the fight to protect his crew and ensure the mission succeeded.
And he received the Medal of Honor right there at the State of the Union.
He did. It was a masterclass in political theater. And then the emotional payoff right after. Alejandro Gonzalez, a Venezuelan woman in the gallery, was reunited with her uncle Enrique.
Enrique was a political prisoner.
Released directly after this U.S. raid, Trump is showing the human cost of the military action and the immediate, joyful human victory.
It's highly theatrical, but it's also an undeniable demonstration of raw American military power. How does Spanberger even begin to counter a narrative like that? A successful covert raid, a captured dictator brought to justice.
It's incredibly difficult. She takes a much more skeptical, systemic view of these supposed wins. She accused him of bowing to a Russian dictator, which is almost certainly referencing his policy on Ukraine.
Which Trump called the ninth war he is actively working to end.
Right. Spanberger implies that ending the war in Ukraine under Trump might just mean completely surrendering to Putin's terms. And regarding the strike in Iran, she said he is recklessly planning war.
Which is an interesting counter, because Trump claims he prevented a war with Iran by destroying their nukes preemptively.
It's a classic difference in geopolitical perspective. Is a preemptive kinetic strike a prevention of a larger war? Or is it an act of war that inevitably invites massive retaliation? Spanberger is warning the country that these unilateral actions are actually making the world much more dangerous, not safer.
She also mentioned that we are actively ceding technological power to China.
She's looking at the long game. While Trump is celebrating a tactical raid in South America, she's worrying about the foundational technological infrastructure of the future.
Let's touch on the domestic culture war a bit more before we start to wrap up. Housing. Trump announced an executive order banning Wall Street firms from buying up single-family homes.
This is a fascinating populist economic policy that actually overlaps quite a bit with some traditional progressive critiques of capitalism.
He told the story of Rachel Wiggins.
She lost 20 different bids on houses to massive faceless investment firms. It's a story millions of millennials and Gen Z listeners know all too well right now.
And Trump says, homes for people, not for corporations.
He wants Congress to make that executive ban permanent law. It shows how he's triangulating, using heavy government power to intervene directly in the free market. It's not traditional Reagan conservatism at all. It's nationalist populism.
And then there was the religious aspect. He claimed a tremendous renewal in faith across the country.
He prominently mentioned the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, that was very heavy. He said Kirk was assassinated last year.
He introduced Kirk's widow, Erica, to the chamber. By honoring a fallen political ally explicitly as a martyr, he strongly reinforces the idea that his movement is not just political, but deeply spiritual, and that it is violently under attack.
Spanberger, though, sees a very different kind of rot in the system. She listed a long litany of corruption allegations against the administration.
She didn't mince her words. She directly accused Trump of enriching himself and his family members while in office. She brought up the alleged cover-up of the Epstein file
Ghost scams.
and taking lavish gifts from foreign princes, specifically mentioning airplanes and ballrooms. She's painting a picture of a total kleptocracy, where the golden age is really just gold plating for the president and his wealthy friends.
We're coming to the end of the speech analysis, but we have to mention the final hero he brought out, Royce Williams.
A true living legend, a 100-year-old pilot who served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Trump told the story of a classified dogfight in 1952.
7 Soviet jets versus Royce alone in the sky.
And he took down 4 of them.
He did. And the story was kept top secret for 50 years to avoid escalating the Cold War. He finally received the Medal of Honor at age 100.
It fits perfectly with Trump's overarching theme, honoring the legendary heroes of the American past to boldly launch the future.
It does. And speaking of honoring heroes, Trump announced what he calls a warrior dividend.
$1,776 for every single service member?
He noted that it was initially going to be $1,775, but he added a dollar just for the historical symbolism.
I never asked anybody if we could afford it, he said.
That's the exact quote. It's a direct, unbudgeted cash payment to the military, theoretically funded by these new tariffs. It solidifies military loyalty and boosts morale while neatly tying it all back to that magical 1776 date.
So we've unpacked the policies, the harrowing stories, the political attacks. What does this all mean when we put it together?
If we step back from the individual moments, we see a president who is acting with unprecedented, almost absolute confidence. He is entirely bypassing traditional constraints on his office.
Give us some examples of that.
Well, he is using voluntary tariff compliance when the Supreme Court explicitly says he has no legal authority. He is creating massive new entitlement programs like the Trump accounts prominently branded with his own name. He is conducting massive unilateral military raids to change regimes in Venezuela without congressional approval.
He's fundamentally reshaping how the government operates.
He is. He's building a system that relies heavily on his personal power and direct, tangible benefits handed to citizens. Lower drug prices via his website, cash for your kids via his accounts, cash for soldiers via his dividend.
And Spamberger is arguing that this entire setup is a dangerous facade.
She's arguing is a shiny distraction from the terminal erosion of democratic institutions. She points to the recent election results in Virginia and New Jersey, where Democrats won, as concrete proof that people actually want change and normalcy, not this high-octane, rule-breaking style of governance.
She said the revolution that began in 1776 has not ended.
Both of them forcefully claim 1776. Trump sees it as the runway leading directly to his golden age. Spamberger sees it as the eternal spirit of rejecting exactly these kinds of excesses.
It is a profound battle for the very soul of the 250th anniversary.
It absolutely is.
You know, what really stands out to me is the sheer density of news in these transcripts. In a normal political year, a U.S. military raid on Venezuela would be the only thing we talked about for a solid month.
Or the Supreme Court striking down major tariffs. Or a federal ban on Wall Street housing purchases. Each of these is a massive, era-defining story, and he delivered them all in one single night.
It feels like a massive acceleration of history.
It is, and that leads to the big unresolved question for all of our listeners.
Let's hear it.
The president is relying heavily on this 250th anniversary as a grand, unifying moment for the country. But the actual policies he's enacting, tariffs that openly ignore the highest court, a war on fraud targeting specific minority communities, preemptive military strikes, these represent a radical, unprecedented restructuring of how the U.S. operates globally and domestically.
So the question is,
With the Supreme Court sidelined and the military used for spectacular feats of regime change, is this golden age truly a restoration of the American past, as he claims? Or is it the creation of an entirely new, undefined system of governance where the president's will essentially is the law?
a new system, cleverly disguised as the old one. That is definitely something to think about.
It certainly is.
Well, we want to hear what you think. Check the show notes for the links to the full transcripts. Read them yourself. Don't just take our word for it.
Always go to the primary source.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.